Let me ask you something real quick. And I need you to actually think about this before you answer. If your son died repping one gang, if he built his entire life, his entire identity, his entire legacy around that flag, how would you feel if his own mother was seen laughing, dancing, and socializing with the exact opposite side? The side that your son went to war with. The side that his people have been dying against for decades. Because that is exactly what the internet is saying happened. King Von. Devon Daquan Bennett. BD to his core. O Block. 64th and King Drive. The most dangerous block in Chicago. A man who did not just rap about the war between the black disciples and the gangster disciples. He lived it. He breathed it. And according to most people who knew him, he died because of it. And now, footage has surfaced. Footage of his mother, Taysha Bennett. Surrounded by individuals the internet has identified as Gangster Disciples members. The same gang. The same opposition. The same people Vaughn spent his entire life at war with. And the internet? The internet is absolutely losing its mind. Stay right here. Because this story goes way deeper than a viral clip. Alright. Before we get into that footage, before we talk about what people saw, what people said, and why this whole situation broke the internet in half, we need to go back. Way back. Because if you do not understand the history behind what you are looking at, you cannot understand why it hit the way it did. So let's start at the beginning. King Von. Born Devon Daquan Bennett on August 9, 1994. Parkway Gardens, Chicago's South Side. A housing complex so consumed by violence that the young men who grew up there renamed it O Block, in honor of a fallen brother, O.D. Perry, a black disciples member who died on those very streets. That name, O Block, became more than a location. It became an identity, a flag, a declaration of who you were and what you stood for. And King Von wore that identity like armor from the moment he was old enough to understand what it meant. Now to understand why that identity mattered so much, to understand why footage of his mother near alleged Gangster Disciples members sent shockwaves through the internet, you have to understand what the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples actually are. Because this is not just a rap beef. This is not just two artists with a problem. This is a war that has been running for over 50 years. A war that has consumed entire generations of black men and women on Chicago's South Side. A war that has shaped neighborhoods, destroyed families, and written itself into the DNA of an entire city. And it all started not with violence, but with abandonment. Go back to the 1960s. Chicago's manufacturing industry was collapsing. Steel production was drying up. The African-American communities that had migrated to the South Side during the Great Migration were being systematically choked by unemployment, by redlining, by restrictive covenants that blocked black families from buying property in certain neighborhoods, by a city government that had already decided these communities were expendable. Young black men who were tired of being failed, tired of being targeted, tired of having nowhere to turn, they started banding together. Not for crime at first. For protection. For survival. Because when the system abandons you completely, you build your own structure. Out of those conditions rose the disciples, later known as the Devil's Disciples. And one of the founding figures of that movement was a teenager named David Barksdale. King David. A name that would echo through Chicago streets for decades after his death. And here is where King Von's story becomes even more personal than most people realize. Because Von himself reportedly claimed to be the grandson of David Barksdale, the founder of the Black Disciples, the man whose blood supposedly ran through Von's veins. That was not just an affiliation for Von. That was ancestry. That was legacy. That was something he carried with him every single day of his life. Meanwhile, in 1964, in a different part of the South Side, a group of young men gathered in the home of a man named Larry Hoover. They looked out the window at the hustlers running the block, realized they were sitting on the border of rival territory, and decided to claim their own ground. They called themselves the Supreme Gangsters. And for a brief moment in history, these two organizations, the Disciples under Barksdale and the Supreme Gangsters under Hoover, had no issue with each other. That peace did not last. As Barksdale expanded his operation into what became the Black Disciple Nation, rivalries intensified. Territory overlapped. pride got involved, and the two factions collided. But here is the part of this history that most people do not know, and it is the part that makes everything that came after even more tragic. In 1969, the two organizations actually merged. The Black Gangster Disciple Nation. Hoover and Barksdale sharing power. Brothers in the same structure. United under one flag. That unity lasted 5 years. In September 1974, David Barksdale died. Kidney failure, tied to complications from an old gunshot wound. And when King David died, the fragile piece he had helped hold together died with him. Larry Hoover tried to maintain control. But the love that BD members had for Barksdale was too powerful, too deep, too personal. They were not going to take orders from the supreme gangster side. Not anymore. Not without King David. Members splintered off, re-establishing the Black Disciples as their own independent entity. And what followed was not a rivalry. What followed was a civil war. The BDs and GDs, once brothers in the same organization, became mortal enemies overnight. And that hatred, that violence, that cycle of retaliation, it has never stopped. Not in 50 years. Not once. Through the crack epidemic of the 1980s, both gangs waged devastating campaigns for control of Chicago's drug markets. The GDs ran a rumored $100 million a year cocaine operation out of housing projects like Robert Taylor Homes and Cabrini Green. The BDs operated from what they called the Castle, a headquarters that allegedly generated up to $300,000 a day. Both sides recruited children as soldiers. Young boys who should have been in classrooms were instead being handed weapons and told who their enemies were before they were old enough to fully understand what an enemy meant. The scale of the violence was staggering. In 1 year alone, Cabrini Green recorded 200 people shot or stabbed, a rate of 8 violent crimes for every 100 residents. And at the center of all of it were the GDs and BDs. Fighting over territory. Fighting over drug revenue. Fighting over pride. Fighting over names that had been dead for years, but whose memories kept the war alive. By the 1990s, federal law enforcement started dismantling both organizations from the top down. Larry Hoover was hit with fresh federal charges after authorities wiretapped a visitor's badge being used by enforcers who came to receive instructions from him in prison. He was shipped to a Supermax facility in Colorado, cutting his communication with the streets almost entirely. On the BD side, high-ranking member Robert Allen flipped in 1998 after admitting to selling over 220 pounds of crack cocaine, leading to 21 fresh indictments against BD members. The demolition of housing projects like Robert Taylor Homes in the early 2000s scattered members of both gangs into new neighborhoods, forced new alliances, and destroyed the centralized power structures that had kept some degree of order, however violent, in place. What rose in their place were smaller, more volatile street sets. Crews that claimed individual blocks and feuded with whoever was across the street. Regardless of old alliances. Regardless of history. Just pure, localized, relentless conflict. And out of that chaos rose O-Block. Named after O.D. Perry, a fallen BD soldier whose death on 64th and King Drive became the defining moment that gave the block its identity. O-Block became the most famous BD set in the country. Chief Keef put it on the map. Lil Durk carried the flag. And then came King Von, who did not just rep O-Block, who did not just mention it in songs, but who embodied it completely. Who made it impossible for anyone anywhere in the world to hear the word O-Block without immediately thinking of Davon Bennett. Across the street, literally across the street, GD sets like STL, later renamed Tuckville after another fallen member, and EBT on 64th and Everhart, formed their own identities. Their own rappers. Their own flags. FBG Duck became the most prominent voice from that side, and the feud between Duck and Vaughn was not manufactured for social media. It was real. It was rooted in decades of history. It was an extension of a war that started before either of them was born. And it was deadly. Between June 2011 and June 2014, the single block that became O-Block recorded 19 shootings. 19. On one block. In 3 years. That is the environment that King Von grew up in. That is the environment that shaped him, hardened him, and ultimately, in ways that stretch far beyond one night in Atlanta, contributed to his death. So when footage surfaces of his mother, the woman who raised him on those very streets, who watched him navigate that very war, who buried him after that war claimed him, when footage surfaces of her laughing and socializing with individuals the internet has identified as Gangster Disciples members, you have to understand what people are seeing through. They are not seeing a woman at a club. They are seeing 50 years of history. They are seeing every grave that war has dug. They are seeing Vaughn's face. And that is why the internet reacted the way it did. But here is what the internet did not stop to ask. Here is the question that nobody in those comment sections was willing to slow down long enough to consider. What does Tasha Bennett actually owe to a war she did not start? That is the question we are going to answer. And the answer, when you hear the full story, is going to make you see this entire situation completely differently. So we left off with a question. What does Tasha Bennett actually owe to a war she did not start? And to answer that question properly, to really get into the heart of what this viral footage means and why it exploded the way it did, we need to talk about who Tasha Bennett actually is. Not the version the internet created. Not the meme. Not the viral clip. The real woman. The real mother. Because if you are going to judge somebody, and the internet has already made its judgment loud and clear, the least you can do is know who you are actually judging. Tasha Bennett raised King Vaughn in Parkway Gardens, in O Block, in one of the most violent housing environments in the entire United States. And she did not do it with help. Vaughn's father, Walter E. Bennett, known on the streets as Silk, spent most of Vaughn's childhood in and out of jail. And when Vaughn was just 11 years old, Silk was killed. Gone. Just like that. A child who was already growing up surrounded by violence lost his father to that same violence before he was old enough to fully process what loss even meant. And Tasha was left to carry it all. Think about what that actually means for a second. You are a mother in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. Your son's father is dead. The streets are pulling at your child from every direction. The gangs are recruiting. The violence is constant. The system, the schools, the city, the government, has already decided that your neighborhood is not worth saving. And you are supposed to somehow raise a child with enough love, enough structure, enough of something to keep him from being swallowed whole by everything around him. That is what Tasha did. Every single day. With no blueprint. With no safety net. With nothing but her own will and her love for her children. And she watched Vaughn grow. She watched him get pulled into the streets despite everything she tried. She was reportedly seen in a viral video years ago confronting Vaughn directly about his gang involvement. Not asking him, not suggesting, confronting him. A mother who knew exactly where that path led and was fighting with everything she had to pull her son back from it. But the streets of O Block do not let go easily. And Vaughn, shaped by loss, shaped by loyalty, shaped by a neighborhood that had already taken so much from him, kept going deeper. She watched him get arrested. She watched him go to jail. She watched him come home. And then she watched something remarkable happen. She watched her son turn all of that pain into art, into music, into a career that took him from the most dangerous block in Chicago to stages and studios around the world. She watched Lil Durk sign him to Only the Family. She watched Crazy Story blow up. She watched her son become King Vaughn, not just a rapper but a phenomenon. A voice for an entire generation of people who grew up the same way he did. Vaughn's sister Kayla B described what that success meant for the family in her own words. She talked about how Vaughn made sure everybody around him was straight once the money started coming in. How his crew loved him so deeply that many of them called him Pops, a term of endearment that spoke to the fatherly role he played despite being barely in his mid-20s. How he had once taken a photo of Kayla without her even realizing it and later told her he was going to make sure she had everything she ever wanted. There's a lot of situations we don't even know about that he helped people. His guys, he loved them little boys. That is the son Tasha raised. That is the person she put into this world. And then on November 6th, 2020, that person was taken from her. The night Vaughn died, Kayla B was in the parking lot outside Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta. She did not see the shooting itself, but she heard it. And what followed was a sequence of phone calls that dismantled her world in stages. She was in the car with her friends when the gunshots rang out. Her driver froze. Chaos erupted around them. People scattering. Bodies hitting the ground. She called Vaughn first. He did not answer. She called her cousin Bonnie, who picked up and told her Vaughn had been shot, but said he was okay. Said it was only one time. Said he was going to be fine. Kayla held on to those words. She stayed up until 7 in the morning, telling herself he was okay, telling herself to breathe, telling herself the worst had not happened. Then came the second call. He is gone. He is gone. 3 words. And just like that, everything Taysha Bennett had built, everything she had sacrificed, everything she had fought for, it was gone with it. Her son. Her firstborn. The person she had watched survive things that would have broken most people. Gone at 26 years old outside a nightclub in Atlanta. Shot by a man named Timothy Lul Tim Leaks during an altercation with rapper Quando Rondo's crew. And here is what made it worse. What made the wound impossible to close. Lul Tim was charged with felony murder. The case went forward. And then in August 2023, nearly 3 years after Vaughn's death, all charges against Leaks were dropped. Dismissed under Georgia's Stand Your Ground law. Prosecutors determined he acted in self-defense. The man who pulled the trigger that ended King Vaughn's life walked free. And he did not walk quietly. He went on Vlad TV. He described the night in detail. He talked about how his gun jammed. He talked about getting shot by police. He talked about not even knowing it was King Vaughn he had shot until afterward. I didn't know if he was gone or still alive. I didn't even know it was him. Free. Building a music career. Giving interviews. While Taysha Bennett wakes up every single morning without her son. Now let's talk about what happened after the footage dropped. Because the reaction online was not measured. It was not nuanced. It was not interested in context or history or the full picture. The internet saw Taysha Bennett in a club, near people it identified as GD affiliated based on tattoos and hand signs and known associations, and it made its verdict in approximately 30 seconds. Comments flooded in from every direction. People called it a betrayal. People said Vaughn was rolling in his grave. People said she had disrespected everything her son stood for. Memes were made. TikTok edits overlaid the footage with Vaughn's music. The whole thing became a content machine. Grief turned into engagement. Pain turned into views. A mother's night out turned into the internet's latest trial. And the specific charge? That by being near alleged GD members, Taysha Bennett had somehow violated the loyalty she owed to her dead son. That she had crossed a line. That she had betrayed the BD flag that Vaughn lived and died representing. But here is what those comments never asked. Here is what that verdict never considered. Taysha Bennett is not a gang member. She has never been a gang member. She grew up in the same neighborhoods where these conflicts play out, yes, but she was never a soldier in this war. She was a mother trying to protect her son from it. The irony is almost too painful to sit with. A woman who spent years trying to pull Vaughn away from gang life is now being judged by the internet for not honoring gang rules strictly enough after his death. The second layer of this reaction is about gender. Because if you look at the pattern of how Taysha has been discussed online since Vaughn's death, there is something consistent running through all of it. When she posted photos in form-fitting outfits, people told her to act her age. When she was seen clubbing and dancing, people questioned whether that was appropriate for a grieving mother. When a twerking video surfaced, it generated millions of views and split the internet directly down the middle. The GD footage just added another layer to an already existing narrative, that Taysha Bennett is somehow doing grief wrong. That she is too visible, too alive, too unbothered when she is supposed to be permanently broken. But who wrote those rules? Who decided how a mother in her 50s is supposed to carry herself after losing her child? Who gave the internet the authority to police her healing? Because here is the thing about grief that most people who have never experienced real loss do not understand. Grief does not look one way. It does not follow a schedule. It does not mean you stop living. It does not mean you stop going out, stop laughing, stop existing in the world. It means you carry something heavy every single day while still trying to find reasons to keep going. And sometimes, finding reasons to keep going means going to a club. It means dancing. It means being around people who make you feel like a human being instead of just a tragedy. Tasha Bennett addressed the rumors directly. She denied any romantic involvement with any GD member. She said her personal life had nothing to do with gang politics. She said she was focused on healing and living her life. And then the internet kept talking anyway. Because the internet was never really talking about loyalty. It was never really talking about Vaughn. It was performing outrage. It was generating content. It was doing what it always does, taking someone else's real pain and turning it into entertainment. All right, we are in the final stretch. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. Everything we have covered so far, the history, the footage, the internet's reaction, Tasha's response, all of that was the foundation. All of that was setting the table for what I am about to tell you right now. Because the story does not end with a viral clip and a comment section. It does not end with Tasha denying the rumors and the internet moving on to the next thing. This story has layers. And the deepest layer, the one that most people covering this situation completely skipped over, is the one that puts everything else into context. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what was actually happening around King Vaughn in the months and years leading up to his death. Because the BGD war did not just shape Vaughn's identity, it actively shaped the decisions being made around him, the people he was moving with, and ultimately the circumstances that put him outside Monaco Hookah Lounge at 3 in the morning on November 6, 2020. Vaughn's alleged involvement in the violence of that war was not abstract. It was documented. It was real. In 2014, at just 19 years old, he was implicated in the fatal shooting of 17-year-old Gakira Barnes, a notorious GD figure from the STL faction who was herself credited with multiple murders according to street lore, including the killing of O.D. Perry, the very person O'Block was named after. Police questioned Vaughn as a person of interest at the time. Witness inconsistencies prevented charges. But unsealed Chicago Police Department documents in 2021 named him as her killer. His sister Kayla be pushed back hard against those posthumous allegations. Y'all got a video of something? How y'all know my brother did that? If it ain't no video, he ain't dead. Stop putting that on my brother. Let him rest. And Kayla was right to push back. Because pinning unproven cases on a man who can no longer defend himself is not justice. It is not accountability. It is the system doing what it has always done to young black men from neighborhoods like O'Block, defining them by their worst alleged moments while ignoring every single thing that shaped those moments in the first place. But the war kept moving regardless of who was alive to fight it. In the drill rap era, Vaughn's public feud with FBG Duck, a GD-affiliated rapper from the Turksville faction, escalated beyond music into something far more dangerous. Duck's 2020 track openly mocked deceased O'Block members by name. According to FBI files and court documents, Vaughn allegedly placed a bounty on Duck, initially $50,000, later raised to $100,000. On August 4, 2020, Duck was ambushed and killed in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. 6 O'Block BD members were convicted in January 2024 on federal racketeering charges tied to the hit. 3 months after Duck's death, Vaughn was dead too. Shot outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta during an altercation with Quando Rondo's crew. And the chain of violence that his death set off did not stop there. Federal prosecutors later alleged that Lil Durk, Vaughn's mentor, his label head, the person who had been closest to him professionally, placed a bounty on Quando Rondo and orchestrated a murder for hire plot in retaliation for Vaughn's killing. On August 19, 2022, in Los Angeles near the Beverly Center Mall, gunmen allegedly hired by Durk opened fire on Rondo at a gas station. Rondo survived. But his cousin, Savia Lull P.A.B. Robinson, was killed in the crossfire. An innocent casualty of a chain reaction that started with one shooting outside a hookah lounge and kept producing new bodies, new grief, new broken families. Durk was arrested in October 2024 near Miami International Airport while allegedly attempting to flee the country. He was charged with conspiracy to commit murder for hire. 5 alleged OTF associates were also indicted. As of early 2026, Durk remains detained pending trial, having pleaded not guilty. And FBG Duck's mother, a woman who lost her own son to this same war, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Lil Durk, Von's estate, OTF, and Sony Music, alleging they operated as a criminal enterprise that dominated Chicago's drill scene through orchestrated violence. Alleging that record labels profited directly from promoting the dangerous rivalry between BD and GD rappers. Think about that for a second. Two mothers. Both of them lost their sons to the same war. Both of them now navigating the legal and emotional wreckage that war left behind. One of them is in a courtroom filing lawsuits. The other one is on social media being called a traitor for going to a club. Neither of them started this war. Neither of them wanted it. Neither of them wrote the rules that their sons died following. And this is where we come back to Tasha Bennett. This is where everything connects. Because when you lay out the full picture, when you see the 50 years of history, the federal indictments, the retaliatory killings, the lawsuits, the bodies, the broken families on both sides, what does it actually mean to say that Tasha Bennett betrayed her son by being near alleged GD members at a club? It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Because Tasha Bennett is not a soldier. She never was. She is a mother who spent decades trying to keep her son alive in a war that was never hers to fight. She is a woman who lost that fight on November 6, 2020. She is a human being who is trying, in whatever imperfect, complicated, messy way she can, to keep living in a world that took the most important person in it from her. And the people judging her from comment sections, the people calling her a traitor, the people saying Vaughn would be disgusted, the people making memes out of her pain, those people go home at the end of the day and turn off their phones. They do not carry what she carries. They do not wake up every morning and feel what she feels. They consumed Vaughn's story like entertainment, and now they want to consume her grief the same way. But she is not content. She is a person. Kayla B. Vaughn's sister described in painful detail what the aftermath of his death actually looked like from inside the family. She talked about the phone calls that came in stages that night. The first call saying he was okay. The second call saying he was gone. She talked about sitting in that parking lot in Atlanta, hearing the gunshots, watching the chaos unfold, and not being able to move. She talked about what it felt like to grow up in that family. The love, the tension, the complications that come with loving someone who lives the way Vaughn lived. She kind of stuck in her ways. A lot of people say we act alike. Maybe that's why. She still wants to be young and stuff. Kayla was not throwing her mother under the bus with those words. She was describing a woman who refused to disappear. A woman who refused to let grief erase her personality, her presence, her right to exist as a full human being. A woman who, yes, still wants to go out. Still wants to dress up. Still wants to laugh and dance and feel alive. Even after everything. Especially after everything. Because what is the alternative? What does the internet actually want from Tasha Bennett? Does it want her to lock herself inside and never be seen again? Does it want her to wear black forever? Does it want her to spend the rest of her life performing a grief that meets some imaginary standard that a bunch of strangers on the internet invented for her? Vaughn's family released a statement after his death that said something important. It read, "Thank you to everyone who has shown their outpouring of love for King Vaughn. By continuing to play his music and sharing your stories about how he inspired and influenced you, you are keeping his legacy alive." They asked fans to honor Vaughn through his music. They did not ask anyone to monitor his mother's social life. They did not ask anyone to police her friendships. They did not ask anyone to weaponize her pain for engagement. The footage went viral because people wanted it to mean something. For some it meant betrayal. For others it meant a woman refusing to let tragedy define her completely. But what it actually means, underneath all the noise, underneath all the takes and the memes and the comment section wars, is something much simpler and much more human than any of that. It means a mother is still here. Still breathing. Still trying to find her way through a loss that has no roadmap and no end date. And if that means she goes to a club sometimes, if that means she dances and laughs and lives her life in whatever way gets her through another day without her son, then maybe the question is not why she was there. Maybe the question is why we felt entitled to an opinion about it in the first place. King Vaughn deserved better from this world. His mother deserved better too. And the very least we can do, the absolute minimum, is let her grieve on her own terms. Rest easy, Vaughn. Oh, block forever. Alright y'all. That is the full story. And I know that was a lot to take in, because this was not just a gossip video. This was not just another viral moment broken down for clicks. This was real history, real people, real pain, and a conversation that I think needed to be had with the kind of depth and respect it actually deserved. Now I want to hear from you. Because this community right here, this comment section, has always kept it real with me. And I need your honest, unfiltered opinion on this one. Do you think the internet was right to react the way it did? Or do you think Tasha Bennett has every right to live her life however she chooses, regardless of who she is seen with? Drop your answer below. Not just yes or no, tell me why. Because I genuinely want to know where y'all stand on this one. And here is the real question I want you to think about before you comment. If it was your mother, if you were gone and your mother was still here trying to survive without you, would you want the internet policing her every move? Would you want strangers making memes out of her pain? Or would you want people to let her breathe? Think about that. And then drop your thoughts below. If this video gave you something to think about, if it hit different, hit that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it helps this video reach more people who need to hear this story told the right way. Subscribe if you are not already part of this community. We do not do surface level here. We go deep every single time. Share this with somebody who needs to see it. And as always, rest easy Vaughn. Oh, block forever.